Well, hello. It's great to be with you. My name's Adam Raulerson. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm here today to talk to you about conversations. What are those? What are conversations? Let's be honest. Most of us today, we communicate via text and social media, and so many families and people come up to me and say, hey, I need to have a conversation with my kid, and I'm not really sure how to do that. And so how do we transform our fear about having a conversation into support? And that's what I want to talk to you today. So when we think about what keeps us from having a conversation, what are those things? For most people, it's a fear. They're afraid to upset the person that they need to talk to. They're concerned about the fact that maybe they don't have the right information, or there's information out there that they're not aware of. They may mess up. Honestly, our schedules are so busy, and so we don't really have the time or make the time to have conversations. So I like to sum all of these things up into one word: fear. We're simply afraid to have those face-to-face conversations, or a lot of us are. And so what drives our fear? What are the things that get in the way of us having conversations? I mentioned a lot of those, but in reality, what I hear most is I'm afraid of what will happen in the conversation. I'm afraid of what the response might be. If it's a crucial conversation, so if there's concern about maybe substance use or something really bad going on in the family, or a young person, I'm afraid they might say yes, and I don't know what to do. What if you got to talk about suicide? What happens then? What if my child says, yes, I've been thinking about suicide? What do I do? And so what I'd like to focus on is, how do we take that word fear and we think about it differently? What if we thought about it differently? What if we used that small word fear and we applied it differently? And what I would say is, let's look at fear as forming engaged and authentic relationships. How does that change things? How do we use that fear to motivate us to form engaged and authentic relationships? How do we even do that? What does that look like? Well, let's spend a few minutes talking about that. And so it's really just I'm going to go over 4 steps, 4 very simple steps of how to transform fear into an authentic relationship. And so here's what I would say is step 1. We got to make it happen. That's the very first step. We got to make the conversation happen. So the goal of this step is to initiate the conversation. Now you need to develop a plan. You need to have a set time. But you just got to go forward and do it. You can't think about it anymore. You can't wonder when you might get the chance. You're going to have to make a plan, and you're going to have to go forward. So the very first step and the goal is to initiate the conversation. Now that's fearful for a lot of people, and that makes everybody nervous. But if you continue to dwell on it and think about it, you may run out of time. And so we just got to take that first step and initiate the conversation. Now, the second step, we got to make it real. And the goal of this step is to open up the dialogue. And so, people don't care how much you know. Your kids don't care how much you know. Your coworker doesn't care how much you know. What they want is to know how much you care. That's the most important thing for them. Do you care? Do you care about me? Do you care about my situation? So when we talk about making conversations real, that's what we're talking about. We got to open up the dialogue. People will open up and talk to you when they know that you care. And so that's the biggest part of this step. In order to do that, we can't be throwing out accusations and demands and things like that. We got to be open to just demonstrating that we care. Non-judgmental. Give them the space to talk to us. So that's step number 2. Step number 3 is we got to make it meaningful. We got to make it meaningful. And the goal of this step is to reinforce the positive. And so every conversation that we have, we need to walk away with feeling like we accomplished something. And so how do we do that? We got to look for small victories. One, if you're a family or in a relationship where you just don't have face-to-face conversations that often, the fact that you just had a conversation, that's a victory. That's a win. You initiated a conversation, that's a victory. We need to celebrate that. We got to make it meaningful. We need to end on a positive note. When I do work with couples and families, one thing I always try to do at the end of our session is I try to say, hey, everyone in this session has to tell me one thing that you heard today that was very positive for you, one thing that you saw that was very positive. And then the second thing I do is, what's one thing you're going to continue to do in between our sessions that will improve the relationship? And so you always want to end on a positive note. And that's step 3. Make it meaningful. Don't just have a conversation to get your point across. We want to make sure that the person that we're communicating with, and everyone involved in the conversation, feels heard, feels like they have a voice, and feels like it's something they want to continue. And that leads us into step 4. We got to make it routine. We got to create the situation where everyone agrees to continue having conversations. You know, it's not a one-time thing. For a lot of families it is, for a lot of situations it is, but what we want to create is an environment where we're okay having routine conversations. Now this may be tricky. We are all very busy. We have a lot going on in our lives, and so you may actually have to schedule some family time or relational time set aside, take your coworker to lunch, whatever it may be. You got to set aside time to have this conversation. You got to be meaningful about that. You got to plan it. You got to set that routine. And if it's a family situation, have some fun with it. You know, create a family night, play games, do something fun, but also agree that we're still going to have conversations. We're going to check in with each other. In relationships, when there's difficult conversations that we need to have, it's a whole lot easier to have those conversations when our relationships are close and everyone feels safe. And they know that they can talk about things in a way that's not going to create conflict and more stress. I'm not saying difficult conversations don't create stress, but what I'm saying is when our relationships are close, because we're in a routine where we have conversations, it makes that so much easier. And so that's what we want to do. We want to make it routine, okay? And that's the 4 steps. It's really not complicated, is it? It's 4 simple steps. We want to make it happen. We want to make it real. We want to make it meaningful. And we want to make it routine. And people say to me all the time, well, I just don't feel like I communicate well. Well, most of us don't. Let's just be honest. We don't always communicate well. But there's 2 very important communication skills that we talk about and we teach people how to do. And the 2 communication skills that we talk about are I statements and active listening. Now, I statements, if you think about it, is pretty logical. You're approaching a conversation from an I position versus a you position. And we've all seen the you position, right? You've got to do this. You need to stop doing this. If you do this again, you're grounded. You always do this. We use that type of language. What happens when we use the you language? We're always pointing the finger. It creates one of 2 things for everyone. It either creates defensiveness and the need to attack. So if you are starting to attack me and I feel attacked, I've got to defend and I've got to attack back. Or the other situation is I'm going to withdraw and disengage. We don't want that to happen, right? In those 2 scenarios, that's exactly what we don't want to happen. And so we teach people how to use I statements. Let me give you an example. So let's say my son, I have a teenage son, and that's a challenge in and of itself. Let's say he gets caught with a vape. You know, that's a big thing right now. A lot of teenagers, a lot of young people are vaping. And so let's say he gets caught with a vape. And I come to him and I say, you got to stop. You know you're not supposed to vape. You're grounded. You can't drive for a week. You can't talk to your girlfriend. You know you're not supposed to do this. And then we get into a much bigger argument. What if I actually told him what I was thinking and feeling and I used I statements? What if I said it this way? I felt really scared when I found out you were vaping because I'm worried that it might hurt you. I want to make sure that you are safe because that's genuinely where I'm coming from. I know the dangers of vaping. I've seen it. I've read the literature. And so my you is really out of my own fear of what might happen to him. But I didn't express that using the you language. But if I can just approach him from the I statement and help him to understand, I'm concerned about you. That's really what this is about. He can't defend and attack. He can't withdraw. He's going to be much more engaged. Now let's flip that. Let's say his use of I statements in that very scenario. Well, I feel, this is him. I'm my teenager now, using I statements. I feel pissed off when everybody tells me to stop smoking. I'm not hurting anyone. I just want people to trust me more. If he was able to say it in that way, I wouldn't feel the need to continue. You're never leaving this house again. You know, you're not going out with that friend. What I would hear is, he's not feeling trusted. Now, maybe I still don't agree with his decision to vape, or we're going to have more conversations around that, but the message I need to hear is, he's not feeling trusted, and that's what he needs. And so what do I need to work on to help him understand that I trust him? So that's a very easy tool to use. It really takes a lot of practice to get good at it, but once you learn how to use I statements, it really can make a difference in your relationships. The other tool that we use is active listening. Again, it's exactly what it sounds like, right? So an active listener is one that's going to make eye contact, demonstrate that they're listening. So with the nonverbals, maybe nodding, letting them know that you hear them, provide feedback or a response that's appropriate, and just engage in that conversation versus when someone's talking to you, looking away or maybe looking at your phone, not really showing that you're engaged in that conversation. That's not active listening. So active listening is a skill that we need to learn to show the person that's communicating with us that we actually hear them. We're understanding where they're coming from. We're acknowledging what they have to say. We're taking the time to pay attention to them. If we can learn those two skills, it will dramatically change our ability to have meaningful conversations. And so I'm here as a resource to you. You know, this is a very brief conversation that we're having, but in reality, the impact can be tremendous. And so I hope that each of you take this opportunity to think about maybe some conversations you've recently had, or maybe conversations you need to have. Push aside that fear, think about it differently, forming engaged, authentic relationships. Because that's really what it's all about. And so if you need help, if you need support with that, there are people in this community that want to help you. I want to help you. And so we want you to reach out. If you're struggling with that, if you want more support, please reach out to us. We want to help you.